Hi, this is Tavan from Fix the World Morocco. Today in this video, I'm going to show you how to make Orgonite. Okay, now this is a step-by-step guide. I'm going to talk about what materials to use, how to make it, and how much it should cost all in all after you're done. Okay, first I'm going to describe what is Orgonite and then what is it used for. Now basically Orgonite is life energy. It's all around us. The term Orgonite was defined by the late Dr. Wilhelm Reich in the early 1900s, 1930s, 20s, 30s, and so forth. With a series of experiments, he discovered that when he built these what are called boxes or accumulators made of layers of metal and non-metal, that there was an energy field in the inside of these containers. Now it's very interesting, but some of the tests included a temperature variation of the inside versus the outside, and this standing energy also is defined as something that is life force. This energy, when you put blood samples inside these containers, when you put plants inside, they come out healthier. The blood lasted longer inside the chamber than outside the chamber. And this test has been replicated many times since then. Now, we've moved forward in this definition of orgone energy into technology called Orgonite. And Orgonite is basically taking these layers of metal and non-metal and put it into either metal shavings and non-metal, which is epoxy resin. Now, what I'm showing you is a sample of our garden stones, which is one of the uses of Orgonite. Since the standing energy field around these materials basically allow things to grow better, make things last longer, anything you can use Orgonite for deals with making things healthier. For example, with these garden stones that we have here, you can put it near seedlings. You can put it in like a little pot with a little plant growing. And what it does over time is allow that plant to grow healthier because of the orgone energy that comes off of these materials. And we made all kinds of products based on this. So plants and growing things in the garden is one thing. Taking something like a plate of Orgonite and putting it in your refrigerator, what that does is it allows the whole fridge to turn into essentially an orgone accumulator, and it preserves the food in your fridge longer than if you didn't have it inside the fridge. You can take, again, these what we call charging plates made of Orgonite material and have fruits or vegetables rest on top of them, and it preserves the life of the fruits and vegetables longer. If you take a glass of distilled water or mineral water that you have processed that's clean for drinking, you set it on top of these plates, and over a period of time, the standing field that comes off of these materials structures the water. So if you were to take also one of these plates, put it in your freezer, and put ice trays of your water over these plates, it structures the ice as it's freezing with the standing pattern of the field of these plates that it's resting on. So orgone energy and Orgonite are basically things that you need in order to make things grow better and to basically preserve life around your home. First, let me just give you a brief overview of all the things that I have here. Okay, so what we have over here what you see are the molds that I use to make our Orgonite products, and then the actual products that we offer. And for all of these things, for example, these silicone molds, the material is silicone. We actually make the designs inside of them for our pendants. These designs I basically draw up in CAD. I send the design to a 3D manufacturer who either through CNC processes makes a master for these pieces. The masters look like similar to the products that we provide, but they're in plastic, or they're in metal, or they're in wood. And we take these masters and we cast them in silicone. And when we cast them in our silicone, that's how we create our silicone molds. So we have these, what you see here are the different pieces of silicone for our products, the pendants, the pyramids, for our new sleeping pods, and also for our garden pucks, and so forth. And now in making this, going through this process of making our own stuff was a process in its own. And the reason why we do this is actually we basically have full control over go the manufacturing process. This is our charging plate here. And we also then, it's cheaper for us to actually manufacture. Surprisingly, if you get someone else to create your molds, they end up being 5 to 10 times more expensive in the manufacturing process. And so when we went through the process of making our masters for the pyramid, for example, we got this Teflon mold online. Basically, the way this works is it comes together and you tape the ends, and then you fill it with your Orgonite mix epoxy resin. And then after it cures, you peel it apart. And this is how we were creating the masters for our pyramids that we then use to cast for our silicone molds that we end up making for our customers. Now, you could just get these molds online, these Teflon molds that are in pieces and come together to make your pyramids, but this is a long process. To put it together, tape it together, pour it, then cure, then take it apart and clean the mold each time, takes much longer than pouring out of these silicone molds for our customers. So we streamlined the process since we began the research into Orgonite 2 years ago, and $2,000 later, we found out what works for us, what's the most cost-effective and cheapest means of creating this, but yet having a high quality and personalized designs that we've come up with to have the Orgonite that you see in front of you. Now, while I'm making this Orgonite, also I'm using powders. And the reason why I use powders is for the reason that you'd have powders in your supercapacitors versus sheets of metal in your average capacitor, because a supercapacitor can store up to millions of times more charge than your average capacitor because it's powder. Powders in Orgonite function the same way. Orgone energy is intimately connected to electric charges. Therefore, if you want to make your Orgonite more powerful, you use powders, which is why if you go online and try to buy Orgonite, which is strictly powders, it's more expensive because powders, they simply are. But also, the benefit of that is you don't need to use as much powder as you would, let's say, aluminum shavings from the machinist. You have to pay for them, but what you get on the end is a more powerful Orgonite piece, and that is why I use them. Now, the powders, the type of powders I use are, as you can see here, SHUNGITE, which is the black powder, which is a type of fullerene carbon mineral that's found in only one place in the world and has its own properties on its own, dealing with taking stray electromagnetic fields and turning them into beneficial fields. And then the next powder I have is quartz sand. Sometimes I change this between that and mineral rock salt, which comes in abundance here. A lot of these minerals I use as powders are local. I have brass powder here. Again, very fine brass powder, very fine. And if you look inside, as you can see, that is very fine powder. I have steel powder. I'll open that for you. Yeah, that's steel powder. Again, very fine powder I have here. And it's difficult to open this, but this is iron oxide. It's called magnetite. Again, that, like the SHUNGITE powder, it's just pitch black. And I won't open that, but there you go. So when these powders, when I mix them all together, I have at a specific ratio, I have my blend. It kind of shimmers in the sun, but this is the blend. Now, what's beautiful about using powders versus shavings is that the amount of powder I use is much less amount than I would if it was in shavings. You're told often online, if you research making your own Orgonite online, you're told that you have to use 50-50 shavings versus your epoxy resin in volume. Now, I can't open this. This is a white powder of zinc oxide. It's just pure white zinc oxide. So I use that also. But you're told often that you have to use 50-50, 50 shavings versus 50 epoxy resin. However, that does not apply with powder. You only need to use a small amount, and if you try to use 50-50 with powder, you'll actually get something that looks like rubber and not an epoxy. Also, the great thing about powder is you don't need to use much of it, close to more 18% versus the rest being epoxy in volume, because powder has so much surface area, so you don't need much to get a powerful effect. So powder is the way to go, and we make all of our materials using powdered Orgonite. Now the epoxy, what we use is a two-part epoxy, which is very common in resin making projects. This is epoxy, and this is what is called a catalyst. And now any thermoplastic normally comes in two parts. Now epoxy resin, which is what you get when you combine your epoxy versus your catalyst, comes to 2 to 1. So for every, let's say if you had 300 milliliters to pour, 200 milliliters would be epoxy, and then 100 milliliters would be your catalyst. And you mix that together, and over time, in a matter of hours, it hardens into a resin. Now this process, the epoxy resins and resins like that, are defined as a thermoplastic, and they're normally used for anything from waterproofing the decks of your boat, of your yacht, or your floors if you have a storefront, to making jewelry. Resin, everyone has seen and is probably wearing right now resin jewelry. So this is nothing new. It's been used for decades, a long time, and now we're simply using this process to create Orgonite, mainly because it's a non-metal and it contains the carbon chain. It's a type of organic thermoplastic material. Okay, so the epoxy is a thermoplastic, and thermoplastics are any kind of liquids and their catalysts that you put together over time that hardened into the plastic piece that you want. Now, your mobile phone, your smartphone, the casing for that, this is made from a thermoplastic. It's injected into a mold, and that's thermoplastic. Also, your laptops. This is the cases for these. They're thermoplastics. They're liquid initially, and they're cured either through UV or what have you, but they're also mixed with a catalyst, and you get this. Our Orgonite, the epoxy that we're mixing to make our Orgonite, is a thermoplastic. Okay, now this is just a bit of a disclaimer for all those trolls and naysayers out there. Cue the music. Right, so now we're getting all of these, we're getting some comments that come in from people saying, oh, plastic, it's made from plastic, and so it's so bad. Isn't it poisonous? Isn't it going to kill you? Isn't it going to, like, I don't know, like poison your house, your garden and everything like that? Isn't it, I mean, the plastics are so toxic. Is it going to cause brain damage? I mean, you're making Orgonite, but then it does this good stuff, but then you got the plastic, so it does this bad stuff. Therefore, isn't it bad overall? Does it work? Look, Orgonite is a good thing that is made to help stop things like EMFs and to dissipate the chemtrails that is flying over your neighborhood and over your entire society. Now, there are people out there with interests that want to stop that. And they want to be honest, do nothing more than to slowly cook you and microwave you, all right? And these tools like Orgonite are one of the things that can help prevent those harmful effects of taking hold in your house, in your home, on your garden, and in your community. Right, so now that we've got that covered, let's move on. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour an Orgonite bronze charging plate for one of our customers. Now, before I start pouring, I have to prep the mold. Now, I've already designed the mold, taken it to the person who has created this CAD master of the charging plate. I've poured the mold out of silicone, and now I'm about to use this mold that I've just made for pouring the Orgonite. Now, before I do that, if I have used this mold before, I have to actually clean it. So I've already cleaned the mold. Now I'm going to prepare the mold. And the way we get our finish for our brass bronze charging plate, this finish here, is we use a metal coating. And the metal coating we use is a bronze aluminite. And so I'm going to do this process. I'm going to use this brush, and I'm going to brush the inside of the mold, and then it will be ready for me to pour my Orgonite. So I'm going to start on that now. Okay, I don't want to pour too much powder. There's an actual ratio to pouring it, but there's an actual look. There's a look within the mixture, and it should be uniform, but not so much that the powder, the heavy metals, not the metals, but the metals are heavier and denser in the powder, start to sink to the bottom, and you don't want that. You want the perfect mixture where everything is floating inside, but it's dense enough for it to be very effective. So it's like this thick, darkened film that you can just barely see through. So what I'm doing here is I'm checking the thickness and the consistency of the mix, and it's ready now.
And how much trial and error did you have to go through?
A lot.
Talk about that.
Let me tell you, it's not 50-50. If you were to pour 50% of this versus the resin, you'd end up with putty. You'd end up with putty. Something like a butamin or something like that. It'd be like rubber. And when it comes to powders, it's completely different. The surface area for the charge that's being stored for the Orgonite process is much higher. You don't need that much. You don't need that much powder. It's not like shavings. It's like a completely different ball game. So what you have here is basically a composite. So this is Orgonite going into another level. We're going into fine powders, and this is basically composite making here. Using these powders that have shielding capabilities and also create a standing, it's called torsion field, scalar field, but also, or orgone field. So now I'm about to pour this into our mold. everything immediately because this stuff will start to harden, and once you get there, you're not going to be able to reuse this. So as you can see, it's already darkened from multiple uses. So I clean everything immediately so I can reuse it next time. Okay, so we just finished pouring our Orgonite. Now, you're going to have to let it sit in the mold for about 24 hours. That's when it's solid. Now, I tend to check on it about the 8-hour mark. Also depends on what time of the year you're doing this. The more you do this over the course of a year, you realize that the curing time may be longer or shorter depending on things like humidity and temperature. But after it's done curing, it'll be rock hard. You'll know when it's done. You'll be able to just pop it out of the silicone, which is why we use silicone. There's no release agent involved in having to spray the insides of the mold. You simply pour it in, as you saw me do, and just pop it out. Now, our silicone molds are only good for about 10 molds or so, 10 pours or so, so we always have to keep making more. But after you're done, we get this beautiful finish on our bronze brass charging plate. This is the finish here, and this is how it looks on the back.
Can we hold it in the sun?
Yeah, sure.
Can you reach the sun?
Let's see if I can. There's a bit of sunlight here. There we go.
Nice.
Right, so you've just saw the process on how we make our Orgonite here, and in that demonstration it was fairly straightforward. Now, when you start making Orgonite, you're going to make mistakes. Now, I encourage everyone, in addition to what you just saw here, to look at other videos online on how people make their own Orgonite and just do what works with you. But in the beginning, when I first started making Orgonite, when I was trying to get the ratios right for powder, and try to work it all out for the different volumes for every one of these things that we've built up here, I was making all kinds of mistakes. And I mean, I'm talking about, again, trying to use 50-50 with powder. I ended up with rubber, and the rubber wouldn't come out of my metal muffin tins that I put olive oil in to act as a release agent. None of it worked, and I ended up with this rubber in my muffin tins. So, I mean, that was an example. You're going to deal with things like air bubbles. You're going to have all these things happen. I still make mistakes on occasion, so getting the ratio right is the biggest thing. Also, it's things like the epoxy you get. Depending on who makes your epoxy, especially if it's jewel grade versus another type of epoxy, the ratio might be not 2 to 1, or the quality might not be the way you want it. It depends on what it is you're trying to work with. So these were all the mistakes that I've gone through in this 2-year process in trying to come up with this system that I have here. Also, you're going to have people telling you what they use for their molds, what they use for the release agents. For me, I found that silicone is the best thing, but there is a drawback to using silicone molds. Now, the benefit of using silicone molds is once you have a master and you have a silicone, in another video I'll show you how to do that, how to make your own silicone mold. But once you have it, you can just pour Orgonite right in the mold, and after it cures, after the 1 day, just pop it right out, and I do another mold, another pour. So it's very easy. It's very straightforward. Now, the drawback with silicone is that what I found out is that after about 10 uses or so, because of the curing process of epoxy, which it heats up, it starts to wear away at the surface inside of your mold. So the finish will be different, not only on your Orgonite piece, but also the mold will start to degrade on the inside, so that when you pour that, how do you know that it's gone bad? Your mold's gone bad. When you try to pull out that last piece of Orgonite from your mold after the 1 day, it takes bits of the silicone with it, and also it becomes whitish. So if you have a different color silicone mold, it'll become whitish on the inside. It's kind of like a dry rot for silicone. So it's good for about 10 uses, 7 uses or so, sometimes more than 10. It depends on a lot of different factors. However, your mold, if you make it yourself, you make it properly, there are no air bubbles in here, so that's not a problem. Initially, when I was getting these molds made, I was having it made in China. I thought it was cheaper. I don't know why, but my research was that I thought I can do that. But if you send this to a manufacturer to make a mold for you, they're going to put it in an injection mold, and they're going to do a vacuum process to remove the air bubbles, and they're going to charge you a premium for making one of these. For example, something like this, if I was to get it made in China, they would charge me about $280. If I was to get it sent from there to me through DHL, another $200, $300, depending if there's customs involved. And so it ends up being like a $500, $550 expense. However, if you have your own silicone mix, which is easy to get on eBay, and you have a master and a container, which could be literally a piece of Tupperware, this goes from that being that $550 expense to being like, for the cost of the silicone, about $80, and about a few bucks to make one of these. So 550 to, $50, if I include the silicone, but a few bucks for making one of these. That's what we're going to do. So silicone molds is what we do. We make our own parts, we design them, we design our own products. All these designs we come up with, and that's pretty much how we do it. So that's pretty much how we make our Orgonite here. So how much do you think this would cost? I'm just going to describe how much it cost for me when I first started this. Now this is again with using powder for the Orgonite. You might decide to go to the local machinist to get aluminum or copper or brass filings. That's cheap, if not free, and so that's going to save you a little bit of an expense. But let's start with the powders. I first got everything on eBay, and I wasn't sure what I needed, so I just went ahead and got about 5 kilograms of powder. We're talking the brass powder, shungite powder, steel powder, and all these different things. Came to, I don't know, roughly about $300 to get that. Then I wanted to go ahead and splash out on getting resin. So I went ahead and got epoxy resin, and I got that obviously sent to me, flown in. Again, purchased it on eBay, and that was for, I think, 10 kilograms of resin, and that came to $300 total. I mean, including the shipping cost. In fact, the shipping cost about as much as the resin, so it was kind of like a doubling of that. Then the next thing was to, at the time I was working on making pendant mold, and so I did research on getting the mold, like I mentioned previously, getting made in China. That was about a $550 expense for having that initial design that I made in CAD turned into a vacuumed mold made from silicone, flown in from China. And after the customs and everything, ended up being about a $550 expense. I wasn't expecting that. And then the same thing with the charging plate. Now the charging plate, I had the master made here. That master mold, or the master that I used for the silicone mold, I ended up making locally myself. Getting that master made, that 3D CAD plastic object that I would use to make my charging plate molds, that came to about $300. Okay, so I've just covered the price of taking your design to a manufacturer, about $300 for the part. If you want to get the mold making somewhere else and you not make it yourself, the expense there. And now, and also dealing with things like accessories, like for these pendants to get the string and the fittings, that's about $30, $40 if you get it in bulk. I got bulk of these, so I got like thousands of these little fittings here. So,
and the necklace tie, and you spent $60 on that.
Yeah, $60 on the necklace tie. And basically, if you put in all the cost of that, the cost for these Teflon molds, about another $100. And when you add this all up, you find shipping ends up being, if not half, most of the cost of the materials, especially for the powders. So if I was to go on Alibaba or eBay and look at the cost for these powders, they'll be fairly cheap for the kilogram. They're actually very affordable. But then you find to get them flown in from one place to another, the price is through the roof. It ends up being 100 or so or more. When I add this all up,
The mica.
including the things like our metal finish that we use for our either mica, aluminite, chrome for our holographic finish that we use for our products, you can spend close to $2,000 to get set up before you start your project. And that's how much I end up spending over the course of a year and a half of actually getting engaged and trying to make something, making the process and learning down to the very gram how much it costs to make it. However, I have to emphasize, look, if you're just doing this for like as a hobby on a small scale, maybe for like your family and some of your friends who are wanting to clean the environment, you can probably get away with setting up everything you need for between $300 and $500. Again, if you were to go to the local machinist and get any kind of metal filings that they had and just collect that up and just get some epoxy on, if not on eBay, they might have it at the local hardware store if you're fortunate that they have that as part of their supply, then you're going to cut down the shipping costs, you're going to cut down all those logistics, and yeah, you can probably get for about $300 to $500 to actually start making Orgonite for you, your family, and your friends. So now you've seen how we make our Orgonite, how we make all of our pieces. We've received beautiful customer reviews with our products, like our pendant products. So we have the blue metallic pendant, we have the purple, it's our Fix the World pendant, and we have the bronze pendant, and we have a special extra shungite pendant. That's the one I'm wearing. We have these on offer. We've also received some very good reviews with people who have been buying our 4 pyramid family pack. You use that family pack to grid around your property, around your home. If you have a flat roof, you can grid your flat roof, or you can grid it on the corners of the property of your home. And what this does is creates a standing field above your home that basically eliminates the chemtrails, not only above your house, but also of your entire neighborhood. So that's why you want the pyramid family pack, and we have a special for that, and the special is at unbeatable price, and we've received some really good reviews about that, about the changes they're seeing in their home, and I mean it's amazing, the reviews we get, and it's really exciting. It's what makes us keep making more of these. We also have on offer our new product, which is the Orgonite sleeping pod. It does the same thing as a charge plate, but this is specifically fits in the palm of your hand, and it's something that is portable that you can travel with. If you go into hotels, if you travel abroad on business, it's something that you can put into your purse, your pocket, put it under your pillow at night, and it's thicker than the charge plate, and it's made specifically as to relax you, to calm you, and to make you fall asleep at night. Again, you put this on your pillow near your bed near you, and we received some good reviews on this already. We also have, soon to be put on our store, the garden stones. It's going to go into our urban garden stone kit, and basically it's going to be in packs of 4. And the idea of these is to have it on near ceilings, or if you have potted plants. If you don't have like a garden, but you have like kind of like in an urban or a space that's limited, but you have some potted plants, you put one of these or a few of these around your plants, around your young plants, and it just makes them healthy, keeps them, preserves them, gives them more energy so that they're more robust as they grow. Again, all of our products contain shungite also. So, and finally, we have our tried and tested charging plates. You can either get it in bronze, brass, or you can get it in the extra shungite plate. And both charging plates, again, you can have it on your bed, you can have it under the pillow next to you to fall asleep. You can have it in your fridge and your freezer to preserve the food in your fridge or freezer, and your freezer to structure the water and the ice in your freezer. And again, all charging plates, you can have whatever sits on it, whether it's fruits, vegetables, or a pitcher of water, your drinks. It structures it, it gives it more energy, and it preserves the things on top of it. Again, what's great about these things, all these Orgonite products, is that you can do the ice test to measure the strength of your Orgonite piece. Basically take distilled water and you put this in the freezer, any of our pieces, and what comes out is a beautiful vortex configuration of spires and what have you. This is the standing pattern above all strong Orgonite pieces, and again, that's what all of these things do. And the other offers we have for all of our products, look at that. Look at those offers on the link below, and it'll take you to our offer page. And that basically concludes this presentation. And thank you for watching. If you have any comments or questions, just let us know. And please write to us, because we respond to all feedback. So I'm looking forward to talking to you, to listening to you, to taking your order, and we're at your service, and thank you.